Good evening, University of Regina, all the professors, students, and parents watching. Tonight on this news segment, we are going to be discussing drugs in the school system. Is this a concern? So, our investigative journalists are out in the field experiencing and asking questions to future educators, to present educators, and to the parents of the students in these schools. So, stay tuned because we have some exciting interviews coming up.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Pilkey and I'm live downtown. I'm going to interview a few mothers today and what their views are about drugs in the classroom and school system. I'm here with Kathy, who has two daughters that are in university, one 21 and one 19. So, with the new changing policies in Canada revolving around drugs, how does that make you feel?
It doesn't seem to bother me at all because I think that now that it's legalized, I don't think more people are going to go out and do drugs.
Fair enough. So with your daughters being able to go to the bar, are you concerned more about drugs circulating through the bars more, giving them more access to it?
No, not at all. I think that the people who were buying illegally before will probably continue to buy illegally because it's cheaper. And so will it really change the way things were happening in the bar before to now? No.
So with the easy access, because they are of age, do you think it'll entice them to go out and buy?
I don't think so.
Oh, you have some good kids there. Hi, I'm here with Angie, whose daughter is recently in high school. How does that make you feel?
Old.
Fair enough. So with the recent drug policies in Canada changing, does it make you a little nervous, or how does it make you feel?
I think that, drugs are going to be more prevalent in school. There's going to be more opportunities for people to get drugs. Maybe they're going to be better drugs, but I think, will it affect my child per se? Not necessarily, depending on how I've raised her.
Fair enough. So with her coming into high school, have you heard more about the drugs, or?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Yeah, definitely. There's been a lot more talk about it, a lot more. She's seen it a lot more, not necessarily drugs as much as vaping. Vaping is more prevalent, but the circles that she hangs out with aren't into drugs that much that I know of.
Well, that's good.
So, but yeah, it definitely, I mean, she's heard a lot more about it. It's a lot more open when you get to the high school years.
Fair. Hi, I'm here with Renee, whose daughter is also recently in high school, grade 10 at Campbell. How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel a little bit nervous, but exciting for her.
Oh, perfect. So with the recent drug policies changing in Canada, does that make you feel nervous, or how does that make you feel?
I feel a little bit confused. Not sure how it's going to affect the future generation. What I'm thinking for my daughter, if she is going to choose to do something like that in the future, at least she can go somewhere where it's cleaner product instead of going to a dealer and you don't know what you're going to get and it can be laced with something else. So
Yes.
a little bit unsure of it. Hoping my daughter doesn't go that route. I'm pretty sure she won't, but at least it kind of gives us some safety that it get a better product and not risky.
So with her recently transitioning into high school, have you noticed more drug talk, or?
Yeah, we're talking a little bit more about
Yeah.
it. Yeah, we just talked about it on the weekend here,
Okay.
and she said she does hear about it, at her school,
Okay.
and just tries to avoid those people.
Yeah,
I try
that's
to
good.
shelter her a little bit, but it's kind of impossible
Once you
in
get to high school,
schools.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
But-
drugs are popular in the school, or?
I think so. I think it depends on the kids, right?
Depends on
And the choices that those kids decide to make, and the personality of your children,
That's true.
and the conversations we've had. So I'm pretty sure, I'm confident to say my daughter doesn't take that route
Hopefully not.
and avoids it at all costs, and she focuses on her studies.
Hi there. Hi. As a future educator, how do you plan on preventing drug use in your school?
As a future chemistry teacher, I would take the scientific approach and explain the biology and chemistry of the addictive properties of drugs and, take that approach with my students.
Why do you think this would work with your students?
I think that there's already enough process in taking like an emotional route and trying to appeal to them that way, and I think a scientific approach would help broaden the perspectives that they're presented with.
What drugs do you think will be most commonly used amongst the students?
I think alcohol and marijuana will be a huge issue, and they already are in a lot of places. And considering now that both are legal, they'll be even more predominant in schools.
If you came across a student who was abusing drugs, what would you do to help them?
I would approach that student and offer them, counseling services. Maybe refer them, give them what they need, or if they weren't comfortable going to somebody like that, I would offer myself as someone they can talk to and try to help them through this issue.
Hi there.
Hi.
As a future educator, how do you plan on preventing drug use in your classroom?
I plan on having presentations so that the students know like the effects and what each type of drug does to them rather than what they think they know, so they get more knowledge about it.
Cool. Why do you think this will work?
I think it'll work because a lot of the students don't understand how the drugs work and what effects they have, and this way they get all the facts.
What drugs do you think will be most used in the school setting?
I think smoking and like cannabis, vaping are definitely more predominant than other drugs in schools.
Why do you think these are the most commonly used among students?
Because they're the ones that most students have access to, whether through like older students, parents, family relatives.
Hi.
As a future educator, how do you plan on preventing drug use in your classroom?
I plan on being proactive and talking about the issues before they happen.
What are some examples of this?
I will show them videos and pictures and different uses of media that show the negative effects.
Why do you think this will work with your students?
Because by using the media, they will have more of an impact than just the students reading about different articles and stuff like that.
Cool. What strategies will you use if you recognize that a student of yours is using drugs?
Being I don't have much experience with that, I will talk to one of my colleagues who does.
Good answer.
Thanks.
What drugs do you think will be most used in the school setting?
Alcohol, cigarettes, smoking, that type of stuff, vaping, and probably cannabis.
Why do you think those ones will be the most commonly used?
Because those are the ones that students have more access to, whether it's at home through older friends, etc.
Thank you.
Hi everybody, thank you for joining me today, Leslie. Leslie is a teacher with Regina Public School Division. She is a learning resource teacher and has been for the last 5 years, but she's been teaching for 13 years, and so I thought it would be a good opportunity to get an inside view of what illegal drug use might look like in the elementary school system. So thank you for joining me today.
You're welcome.
And I guess we'll begin. So I was wondering, what has your experience been with illegal drug use in elementary schools and kind of throughout your career?
Well, I've had sort of very different levels of experience with illegal drug use and students in elementary schools. For the past 4 years, I've been in an elementary school, and this has been the longest stretch where I have been. I have not had to personally deal with students and illegal drugs at the school I'm at right now. I've had students in the past where they've been on drugs at school, or I know there's been drugs sort of in the school itself.
So that would be from K to 8? Kindergarten to grade 8?
I've had some experience with some grade 8 students who have had drugs at school, not been high, but have had them in the building. The experience that I've had sort of has been just knowing that it's happened and knowing that it has been dealt with.
And so, do you think there's a time when a student who has been, they do have drugs in the school or have been on illegal drugs, is it typically an expulsion that they face, or what is the consequence, in your experience, for a learner having drugs on them at school?
Well, in all times, the school is required to make sure that all students in the building are safe. So typically, the expulsion is because that student is not going to be displaying safe behaviors in the building.
Do you think there's ever a time when the learner is safer at the school than at home, so it'd be better for them to keep them at school? Say they got their drugs from home and they come from a bad home life. Would the administration consider keeping them at the school or not in your school specifically?
We want to make sure the student is safe. So if we're having a situation that student is removed from the other peers, just not necessarily in the classroom, and we do also want to make sure that all students are safe, especially and that student who is, if they have drugs or are on drugs at that time, then we need to make sure. typically I would think the school resource officer would be one of the calls that would be made by the school administration, because it would be the school admin team that would be dealing with the student and what's going on.
So you're a learning resource teacher. Who, say one of the learners that you were working with, you suspected they were high or on any kind of illegal drug, who would you get involved to help the process from beginning to end, from identification to having the discipline carried out?
That would be my first step would be to contact my school's administration, my principal or vice principal, whoever I could find, and get a hold of Forts.
And does each school have their own counselor, or is it Regina Public would have one counselor for all of Regina Public?
Every school has a counselor assigned to them.
Okay. And so as a learning resource teacher, because you're working more one-on-one or in small groups with students, apart from everybody else, do you think you would have an easier time identifying if somebody was using, or because you do know them a little bit better maybe, or do you think it really wouldn't matter, any student could hide it, or do you think you'd be better equipped to notice that because you are an LRT, or?
Maybe with the students that I work with at the beginning of the year. As we get closer, once the classroom teacher gets to know those students, they're going to know as well. Because they're going to know, they'll notice the change in the student.
In the behaviors.
Yeah.
So what are the policies in your school specifically around illegal drug use? And are these policies consistent throughout Regina Public, or does each school construct their own?
I believe the policy is a zero tolerance policy, and at the base of it, it is an illegal activity. So we get the student resource officer involved, and the police are involved.
So for people who don't know, what is a
student resource
officer?
So that is a city police officer that's assigned to work with students. And again, every school has a resource officer attached to their building.
Do you, in all of your teaching experience over the past 13 years, can you recall what the youngest person who has been caught with drugs or on some kind of illegal drugs would be? Do you ever find it in the younger grades, or?
I know I've worked with students in high schools that have either been on drugs or also alcohol at school. I have not personally worked with any students in elementary schools that are on drugs.
Okay. Does your administration ever talk about, and I'm talking about also like the Regina Public School Division, the STF, do they ever discuss with the teachers or the schools in general about what the future direction might be as to policies that are going to be implemented or changes that are coming up? I know we're talking about elementary schools, but now they've legalized marijuana, so I know a lot of high schools will maybe be looking at policies there. Is there any talk about future policies or practices for drug use?
There are guidelines that have sort of specific grades and sort of what we as teachers bring up as part of our health curriculum that will be age appropriate, and just to ensure that students know safe and healthy use.
Wow, what thrilling interviews. We learned so much. Now, let's flip the roles and hear what our investigative journalists have to say about the issue. Caitlin, what did you find about your interview interesting?
Oh, hey, didn't see you guys there. Heard you're looking for a follow-up from my interview with the mothers based on the drugs in the schools and how their daughters are doing with it. Well, based off what I've heard, I wasn't overly surprised. These drugs don't seem to be prevalent, but also drugs were prevalent there, which is normal, but they are seeing it a lot more than I did in high school. Something that did surprise me is when I was off the record with one of the ladies I interviewed, Renee. The ladies are hiding drugs such as cocaine and weed up in the bathroom ceiling tiles at Campbell Collegiate, which was very surprising because when I went to that school, nothing like that I ever heard of. She also did say her oldest daughter, Megan, she did send to Luther because she thought drugs would kind of be out of the scene a bit more. It's a more highly academic school. But when she did ask her daughter about them, she said they did have lots of drugs there. They were just more expensive. So that was also very surprising to me. Angie, her daughter, does go to Martin, so it's a very highly sports school. So when I heard that drugs were still talked about lots there, it also did surprise me because you didn't think kids like that would be wanting to be involved in drugs, but drugs are everywhere in this city. They're very popular. They're on the rise, so it's crazy that these kids can get their hands on it so easily. But it was nice getting the perspective from these mothers and their views on things, and it's glad to see that there are people out there raising their kids right. So you guys get out of here. I gotta get back to work. Thanks for talking with me today.
Colton, now to you.
After talking to future teachers, it seems the best way to prevent drug use is to make sure students are all educated on the consequences drugs can have. The drugs that students will probably be most likely to use seem to be alcohol and cannabis, since they are more accepted in society and easy to access. Also, if it is known that a student is abusing drugs, it is best to support the student in finding someone who can help them overcome their
Let's see what Amy has to say.
Oh, hey there! I'd like to talk to you about what I found in my report. In my interview with a teacher who currently works with Regina Public School Division, it was good to know that although there is very minimal issues with illegal drug use in the elementary schools, and there is a little, but that it's predominantly not affecting the learners of today, our young learners of today. Policies and supports are in place for teachers and students and parents to access at any time should you know of someone who may need help. What I took away from this interview was that it is vital to know your students. Watch their behaviors. Know what's normal and what's abnormal for them. And offer support anytime you can. And let your students know they're never alone.
So in conclusion, we should all be worried about the drug use that's happening in schools or may potentially happen. Thank you so much for viewing, and I'll see you next week to talk about our next news segment on sleep-deprived university students.